Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Am Reading April 2022 finale video. April has been a crazy month. I don't think any of the highs really matched any of the lows for me, and I'm very much looking forward to May, except I think I'm going to have to haul ass in order to complete my BookTube prize requirements in time, so we'll see how it goes. But for now, here's what I did manage to get through, or hope to get to very, very soon for this end of April, and this, I guess, last week of April since my last Am Reading video. So anyway, on to the point. As usual, I'll start these Am Reading videos with the latest story, the next story in this Dorothy Parker collection of short stories that I've been reading from since May. This week I read The Waltz, which was published in 1933, and I'm on an upswing again with Dorothy Parker, which is nice because I feel like I've been a little bit off kilter with her lately, and I was worried that we'd get yet another dashed off short story about a bimbo woman. And although this is a dashed off short story about a woman, she's not quite the bimbo in the way that a lot of the other ones have been lately, you know, being obsessed with men. This unnamed protagonist is in fact quite the opposite. She's through, at least with the man who is taking up her time and attention at this dance that they're at. They're the only two sitting at a table, and he asks her if she wants to waltz, and she doesn't really, but she feels like she has to say yes. So she says yes, and then this bumbling man keeps kicking her shin and stepping on her feet and all of that. And the italics are her conversation that she's actually having with him, which is all very courteous and polite and obsequious, and I mean, and more than like obsequious, it's, you know, accommodating to his clumsiness and his desires, even though she wanted to sit down to begin with and certainly doesn't want to be stepped on by this dude. But it feels like conventionality says, well, you gotta dance with a guy who offers himself, so that's what we're doing here. But most of the story is her own internal thoughts, and this is something, of course, that, you know, it really comes down to the quality of the writing and sort of the tone aspect that the author would want to take. This could be a ponderous or onerous or self-pitying, you know, overwrought story like poor me, but, you know, Parker, it goes towards sarcasm and has some really funny lines. So you want to stay with this woman even as she's putting herself through hell to dance with this guy. So yeah, it worked better for me. And I'm a fan of a new social message about the realities of women in the day. The first book I finished this week is Sister of Mine by Sabra Waldfogel, which I held up last week. This was at the top of my Goodreads TBR, so I wanted to snatch it up, keep that line moving. This is a historical fiction novel taking place in the antebellum South, and it primarily focuses on two sisters. They are both the daughters of a plantation owner in Georgia, but one is his legitimate white daughter and one is his black daughter that he had with one of his slaves, who then died in childbirth, or maybe shortly thereafter. But this story predominantly takes place when the girls are like in their teens to their 20s, or around that age. And it starts shortly before the Civil War, and then it ends basically as the Civil War is over. And another big part of this particular novel is that this plantation, these planters that we are following, they are Jewish, which is generally rare. There aren't that many Jews who lived in the South in that time, but among them there were slave owners, predominantly shopkeepers, but then the planters would have more slaves and, you know, have more wealth and have more need for, you know, hands to, you know, pick the cotton and keep that, you know, cottage industry going, and all those excuses for why slavery was necessary, yada yada. But anyway, that's why this is a challenging read. You know, I'm very interested in Jewish history, but this is a negative part of our history where we took part in human rights abuses, grand human rights abuses, or at least, you know, some Jews did. And I thought this novel did decently well with the storyline and with probing the realities of these characters. One of the things I think that can be very hard to square is the docility of a lot of the slaves, and how they sort of played into these racist roles that these planters and also just broader society had about black people, about how, this is really what's best for them. And I feel like Waldfogel deftly handled the fact that a lot of the reason that slaves, that people who are, this oppressed, could buy into that mindset is because of the reality that they know that they are outgunned and overwhelmed, and that if they make a fuss, things might only get worse. I mean, it's not that easy to, incite rebellion from this vantage point. It happens occasionally, but it's not that easy to succeed, especially in the U.S. I mean, it's a different sort of reality than like the Caribbean, where there were far fewer white people and far fewer guns, I believe. But I'm getting off of topic here. Another thing I think Waldfogel did was create these Jewish characters who, felt like real people. They weren't, evil, mustache twirlers. But at the same time, I don't think she let them off the hook for what they did and what they were culpable in. At least, I mean, that's my take on it. This is a very fraught subject, after all, about this human rights abuse that, America let, overtake them for centuries. And we've had a lot of trouble since coming to terms with it and coming to terms with the aftermath. But in terms of, I talked in my last video about how, since this is fiction, I'm curious, my main objective is to find characters I find believable, so they aren't necessarily stand-ins for the broader social issues that nonfiction should touch upon, but they have to feel like real people. And to me, I think these people felt like real people, maybe in a little too much of a sprawling narrative. There were such things, like one of the planters and slave owners might actually be more challenging because he is a nice guy. I mean, the fact is that he came to America as an immigrant from Germany after a German revolution actually failed, and it was apparent that as a Jew he'd never be a full citizen there. He comes to America for the chance to, make his fortune, and living in the South, a big way to sort of challenge yourself and to, make a nice nest egg is to go into cotton and into planting. And I do think there's a societal commentary at play that no matter what, there's really no way within this system to do that without resorting to slavery. I mean, certainly there's no way to go into an equal partnership with your workers in the South at that time. And in fact, this particular slave owner looked into if he could free his slaves, particularly when he gets involved with one of them, with one of the sisters, and that's not possible. And he also treats them with respect, but I'm hoping, like, everyone understands, the underlying issue is that, it's still a human rights crime. You still are owning people. Maybe they are also wanting your plantation to succeed for their own benefit, but you still roped them into this against their will because they have no will. So anyway, yes, as I'm saying, it's challenging. And also there's Jewish content, which I appreciated, although for the most part I think, Judaism in the South was very sparse. There just wasn't much Jewish community. And there's a lot more assimilation into sort of white society. And I have to feel society kind of wanted that too, because in order to keep this racist system of who gets to, be a free person and who gets to be a slave, you have to bolster up this idea of whiteness. And so that's how I think Jews in part were able to get in on that, and they were forced to assimilate because there was not a lot of Jewish community. Like these planters lived out in the boonies in Georgia, and they'd go to Savannah once a year for high holidays, and generally Judaism to them felt like some sort of obligation. I mean, they weren't going to fully convert or anything, but obviously I don't think there was a whole lot of joy in it for them. I mean, I think there was an idea of like passing down heritage, and people would look at the heirlooms they brought from Germany and all of that. So it was a family thing. And then at the end, there was something that I really appreciated with the white Jewish sister who used Yom Kippur as a way to perhaps try to better herself a little bit, which I thought was some nice character development after all that. And of course, since this is a story about Jewish slave owners, Passover would come up a few times in this narrative, and how the characters grappled with, or, refused to grapple with the implications of slave owning versus the narrative of their own freedom from slavery and oppression. And of course, there's other things that, Jews are thinking about with Passover at this time when throughout most of the world they were still, living oppressed in Gentile countries to some degree. So, yeah, there's a lot going on, or at least a lot I come to this with and think about. And in general, I think I was more happy or more satisfied with this story than I feared I might be. But I think overall, I think she did a good job. She obviously did a lot of research. I'm not sure if I'll move on to the sequel or not. There's so much to read, but I am glad I gave this a go. The next book I finished is also Jewish in content. This is Wolf Lamb Baum by Aviya Kushner. This is my annual nod to the existence of poetry. I really do not read or interact with a lot of poetry at all. In fact, it really is one collection per year, which I slot into April because it is National Poetry Month. So there we have it. This is a collection by a Jewish poet. I do gravitate toward Jewish poets writing about Judaism just because there's that familiarity. Although there's also some difference because I feel like they can talk about things in a different style because poetry is so much different than prose in terms of what it conveys and how it conveys it. And this particular collection is about Aviya Kushner interacting with the book of Isaiah. And in fact, all of these poems, which some of them harken directly to the history and mythology of what he's talking about, and some of them are more specifically about what her family and what she's gone through in Israel and in America and so forth. I think I rambled on here, but basically they a lot of the poems actually coincide to verses from the book of Isaiah, which he points to in the back. And I, in fact, made a whole video about it where I cherry-picked some poems and some verses and went back and forth about what the original said and how she interpreted it. And I really liked this. I felt like this was visceral and compelling. And you can find the video I did for this collection listed down below. The next book I started this week, I'm almost finished with. I think 83%. It's on audiobook on Libby, so I can check that sort of thing. It is Leviathan Falls by James S.A. Corey, the final book in the Expanse series. I suppose I should chill before I get too maudlin about being finished with this franchise or this universe or what have you, because technically I do have a bind-up of novellas, which I recently showed on a book haul, that I have to get through, which is, complimentary material about this world that James S.A. Corey, or, the two authors who comprise him, made up. They're less connected to the broad storyline, I suppose, but it still means that I have some more fun to get into in this series before, I play a funeral dirge for myself or something. I do love this series. And it is very weird to be at the ending where certainly, there's that feeling of pressure about tying up loose ends or making a full circle. And I do think in general there have been a lot more kind of callbacks in a way, like to say, yes, we get it. We're at the end of the line here. And I think to a certain extent that's fair because the characters are also kind of at the end of the line. They realize that they're kind of at the end of perhaps even their mortal coil. Things are pretty desperate with these aliens we've been prodding for centuries in the Expanse world, and we have more knowledge than ever that they're freaking sick of it and maybe want to turn our lights off. And the stakes are high. So I guess it makes sense for our characters, who are also, I suppose, approaching senior citizen age themselves anyway, are looking back more. And one of the ways I'm really happy they did was for Naomi to finally think about her son for the first time since book 5. And it just reminds me of how much more fleshed out she is in the show, and how much I really appreciate her more in the show, even though I do think in this final trilogy she gets a pretty significant role. She becomes like a leader in the rebellion, and it feels like she's trying to find her own voice a little bit. But it's not quite as, I think, full-throated as her character development on the show, even in the books, the first 6 books that were adapted. But it's still all right. It's still good. And the other characters are also doing their part, you know. There's, you know, humans can't get out of our own ways. We're still trying to fight off this neo-fascist Laconian empire here. While at the same time everybody is kind of trying to think, these alien entities might be trying to kill us. Should we try to do something about that? Another thing I'm happy about, I suppose, with this final book, I was a little concerned that the most recent villain, Winston Duarte, the High Council of Consul of Laconian Empire, he kind of fizzled out at the end of the last book, and I'm like, well, that's a little disappointing, you know, in terms of a big baddie for this epic fantasy-esque finale. But in fact, he's not quite as gone as I feared, and I think still remains a credible threat, which is something I'd appreciate. Like, if we're gonna like invest in this person as a big baddie, he should, for, you know, humankind, he should have some staying power. We also have a new sort of more minor villain who is working on behalf of Laconia and causing all sorts of mischief for our main characters in the Rocinante crew, and I feel like they did a decent job with her as well. You know, she's obviously a bad person, but I think that they gave her enough dimension about, you know, what drives her and that sort of thing, and how it also plays into some later developments in the story, since I am so far into the story. One of the major supernatural elements in play has to do with how exactly, I guess, humans might be brought down, to be spoilery. And for a moment it felt like it kind of came out of nowhere, like it was a brand new, fresh threat that had no, you know, threads anywhere else. But the more I think about it, and I think the book kind of prods me in that direction too, I don't think that's necessarily fair. It's another one of those things that kind of threads back to the beginning of the series and something that happened on Eros. You know, spoilers for something. And it's a similar sort of reality that might be awaiting humans that we might have gotten grand hints about way in the beginning. So I'm feeling very generous toward, you know, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank as they wrap up the series. I was a little less impressed, I think, with the last 2 books. I mean, not like I didn't like them, but I didn't quite love them as much as I loved some of the more recent ones before it. But now, I don't know, I'm feeling gracious again. Maybe I'm feeling a bit nostalgic as we're ending the series, but in general, I really do feel like we're firing on all cylinders, and I'm very much enjoying this ride. I do think that overall, I think there's more good than bad in the series, and that that we haven't lost a lot of the stride for the final book, for the finale. And I guess I will be reporting back in my next damn reading, basically to give more thoughts about it, maybe overall thoughts, rambling Expanse series thoughts, which makes me wish I had more SFF-loving fans, I suppose, to listen to me ramble about this and not get bored. But that's where I am right now in my reading. And where I'm going next in my reading is returning back to snobbish literary roots that kind of transcends both fiction and nonfiction, because I am reading A Swim in the Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. And this is literary criticism, where he takes a class that he teaches about analyzing Russian short stories and made it into a big old book that I am now reading for the BookTube Prize in nonfiction. The BookTube Prize was started by Robert at Barter Hordes a few years ago. He welcomes in judges from all around the bookternet of social media, and we read the best in literary fiction, nonfiction, and translated fiction that was published in the US the year before. We start with long lists, and then through 4 rounds we whittle them down to, you know, some winners and finals runners-up. We're now in round 2, the quarterfinals, and I am reading for Nonfiction Group A. So I can't say any more about this as an official judge. I have to be mum about my thoughts as I am reading through the books. But if you would like to hear more of my preliminary thoughts before I started any reading for this round, or just learn more about the BookTube Prize at all, I will have links listed down below. So that about covers it for me now, and that about covers April, as it were. We are at the final day of the year, so not much more to say, except today in the US is actually Independent Bookstore Day, so I am hoping later in the afternoon to do some indie bookstore crawling and shopping perhaps, you know, bolstering up the indie bookstore community. And I'll wrap that on into an April book haul, which I hope to be posting on this channel very, very soon. So stay tuned for that. April has been a crazy month. I've talked in some other videos that my cat had a health crisis that I think we're starting to see the end of the tunnel on. I'm still waiting to hear some results and probably bring her back to the vet, but I think we're in a better time now than we were near the beginning of the month. That's where I have to be right now. In order to function, I gotta be optimistic. The weather in this area has been very up and down, very hot and cold, warm and chilly. I'm hoping now that we're getting into May, we might be getting into warmer weather and I could enjoy the whole month and maybe, you know, settle on a wardrobe that's comfortable or something. I was actually looking ahead to some of my reading that I'm hoping to do like in the fall or something, because I do, you know, schedule a lot of reading well in advance. And the thing that was making me sad was, oh, I can't wait to get to these books, but I'll be so sad when it's colder and darker again. So I wish I could take the May weather and just sort of extend it, and I'm hoping May will be a great month. I think in a lot of ways it's my favorite month. It's also my nephew's birthday month. And it's also a month where I'm going to be going to some in-person book festivals for the first time in 2 years, which I am ridiculously excited about. I don't know if we're jumping the gun a bit, because it always feels like with COVID, it's like, you know, every time you get a little comfortable with, you know, maybe we're, you know, in a safe place, something spikes again. But for now, the festivals are on, and I will be going with precautions, and we'll see how things go. I will probably come out with more books than I should, but that's the life, right? So yeah, a lot to look forward to here. I hope you all have a lot to look forward to as well as this season rolls on. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.